Hello, class. My name is Vinayak, and the TED Talk I selected is The Danger of a Single Story. I identified with this story in particular because I also shared the same preconceived ideas about places when I traveled as a kid, and also realized that I had been misled when I actually went there, particularly India. This TED Talk explores how stereotypes can be created, but also how these pre existing ideas can paint an incomplete picture. This can tie into our lecture through our discussion about cultural relativism, which was judging other cultures based on their own norms and standards, but also how these can kind of shift into prejudice later down the road, especially when we're not exactly seeing the full scope of what's going on. Now, the part that stood out to me in particular in this video was when she mentions by changing the order of these stories, they can paint a different picture. The example that she used that stood out to me in particular was that of the Native Americans and then the British. When you switch the paradigm to focusing on how the colonists stole the homes of the Native Americans, it kind of paints the Native Americans as the protagonists and the people that would later create the early Americans as the villains. I believe shifting this paradigm can be a powerful weapon against prejudice, and I'm going to try to incorporate that into my own life. Now I'm going to shift gears to the idea of a family, and I'm going to start with my own. My family is very much centered around the nuclear family, or the immediate family is also called. My dad was the first out of his family, and even out of my mom's, to come to America. And we didn't really see many of my uncles, my cousins, my aunts, or even grandparents very often. And for that reason, even down the road, as they slowly started to come here and visit, they always felt kind of like strangers to me. In a broader scope, outside of my own, to me, a family is essentially a parent and a child. No matter how many of each. You can be a single parent, you can have three parents, doesn't matter to me. Which is a stark difference from what it was 50 years ago. Back then, especially in America, a family was a husband and a wife, a man and a woman with kids. This was the ideal picture. But as we can see in the article, this is no longer the norm. Single parents are more common than not. And as women are allowed more liberties and opportunities to progress professionally, we're seeing that the idea of settling down and starting a family is getting delayed or scrapped altogether. Now, there are other reasons why electing to have children is in decline, and that is the cost. And that's something that I see in my own profession a lot. The cost of raising a child has grown substantially, and more young couples are realizing that down the road, the immediate costs, such as the bills and increasing student loans that need to be paid, make having a kid financially irresponsible. Although the article talks about how these numbers can fluctuate, and how we did have in 2007 a spike in birth rates, that the overall trend is the birth rate is decreasing. And I think most likely this trend is going to continue until greater incentives are created to have children in the first place. America is not the only place that's suffering from this. I learned recently that Japan also has had this problem for a long time. As women are more geared towards improving their lives professionally, they're not focused on having families and having kids. Whether this is a good thing or a bad thing is hard for me to say. I'm personally all for women progressing professionally, and maybe not having as much kids might be a good thing. But the economic impact down the road, especially for us as we grow older, could be kind of negative. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see.